that he is a prophet. He's telling us to change our religion. So he's now a prophet who tells us to change our religion to make, you don't have to do them physically, it's only spiritual. So you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or to that person who had a vision in his dream. So why did these miracles take place? So the Torah tells us, for God, your God, is testing you to know whether you in fact love God, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul. So this is a test. Whenever someone comes and tries to change the religion, even though he's a miracle man or woman, you should know this is the test. So you have in other times in history where there were others who may have been miracle makers and they changed what it says in the Torah. So we know that's a false religion, and the one who is representing it is not a messenger from God, but a false prophet. You should follow only God your God and fear him. You should keep his commandments that he has given through Moshe. Listen to his voice through the genuine prophets. Worship him in the holy temple and adhere to his ways of kindness. So throughout history, we did have the first Beis Hamikdash and the beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash. We had prophets and prophetess. So there are 48 prophets that are mentioned that we have their teachings. And then there are the women who were also with whom Hashem communicated. There are the official ones. There are 7 women who are prophetess. Can anyone name? Deborah, okay, so Miriam. Anyone else? Okay, Miriam. There was Hannah, mother of Shmuel. She prophesies about Mashiach. Our davening comes from her, how she conducted herself during her prayers. Then you have, at the end of the first Beis Hamikdash, you had a woman called Huldah. Huldah, the prophetess. And she was one who women would go to. Her place she made herself available was on the southern side of the entrance of the Beis Hamikdash, and they are called Sharei Huldah, the gates of Huldah. Different translations. One of it is that it corresponds to the prophetess Huldah, and the women who wanted to have information, that they wanted to ask of Hashem, would come to her and she would give the information. So we have Sarah, Miriam, Deborah, Hannah, Abigail, who was King David's wife, Huldah, and Esther. Those are the 7 prophetess. So what happened after that? Someone wants to have information. Where did one turn to? So the Rambam tells us that even though in earlier generations there were people who were able to give over a message from Hashem, so he says that in the prophecy of Bilam, he says that prophecy will return when the time as now will pass. He spoke this prophecy in 2488. When that amount of time passes, 22,488 years will pass, then prophecy again will become more common to the Jewish people. That corresponds to 1215. 1215, the Middle Ages. This is when there was more known people who had that ability to direct Jewish people as a prophet did in that time. What about more current in our times? So Were there any prophets in the later generations? So there is a letter of the Alter Rebbe that is printed in the Tanya. There is a section in Tanya that's called Igeras HaKodesh, the holy writings of the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe writes a letter to his Hasidim and says, "But why are you coming to ask me questions about physical things, about jobs, about health, about all kind of different things that people would normally ask to have this information from a tzaddik?" Alter Rebbe writes that my role is to answer your spiritual questions, not the physical questions. In order to answer physical questions, that is directed to a Navi. So why are you asking me? That's the letter that you will read. It's letter 22 in the Tanya. You have the translation of the Tanya. Those who want to read this letter, it's letter 22 in the Tanya. However, what did Chassidim do? They continued to ask the Alter Rebbe questions. What kind of livelihood they should have. And I don't know if they asked them where did the donkeys get lost? But they did ask the Baal Shem Tov. They asked someone would come to Baal Shem Tov and say, my horses were stolen. Where could I find them? And Baal Shem Tov told them where to go. So even though the Alter Rebbe writes that only a Navi could answer, the Hasidim still continued to ask the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe answered. So coming back to our time, the Rebbe. People would ask all types of questions to the Rebbe about an operation, about what the kind of job they should have. Even in the early years, they asked the Rebbe, should they buy a new car or should they buy a used car? And the Rebbe answered. But anyway, so someone asked the Rebbe, this again from the people who asked the Rebbe, they asked the Rebbe, how could you answer such questions? The Rebbe said, if someone has the ability to help someone, how could he refuse? So as far as the Rebbe being involved in the world, the Rebbe did say when the Go Forward end, there was someone who came to the Rebbe. He said it in a roundabout way. Someone came to the Rebbe. He was Colonel Goldstein, a chaplain in the U.S. Army. He said he's going to the Mideast. He's taking along his Megillah. But this was like months before. The Rebbe said, why are you taking your Megillah? By Purim, the Gulf War will have ended. And when did the Gulf War end? The night of Purim. The Rebbe spoke about the 6-Day War. Before Alak Boimel, he addressed the crowd. He said that Hashem is going to make great miracles. Before the Yom Kippur War, the Rebbe warned that there's going to be a war. That was the most peaceful time during the summer. The Rebbe gave instructions that they should gather children, and they should pray, take them to the Kotel, take them to Maris Machpelah, make rallies. He made a rally in 770 after Rosh Hashanah, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And when the war broke out, they told the Rebbe, and he says, I know. And he says, it's going to be greater miracles in the Yom Kippur War than there were in the 6-Day War. And those who are familiar with the history, what took place then, Eretz Yisrael, at the point when they attacked, it was going to be devastated completely. They were not ready for it. They were not, and the Rebbe warned them that they should mobilize. But he said, mobilize, you will prevent all kinds of difficulties later. And why should you mobilize at a time that seems to be so much peace? So what happens now? The Rebbe gave instructions that if you don't know what to do, so you have 2 times the Rebbe's, in 1950, when his predecessor, his father-in-law passed away, the Rebbe refused to take leadership. They asked, what should you do? So he says, go to the Ohel, or write to the Rebbe, and he will find a way how to answer you. But other than that, the Rebbe gave instructions that if you have questions about health, then go to a doctor that is your friend, and also consult with another 2 doctors, according to the opinion of the majority, that's what you should do. When it came to a livelihood, go to people who are experts in that field, your friends, ask 3 people, and go according to what they instruct. So the Rebbe said also, he instructed that the Rabbanim, the rabbis of our community, also you should speak to one rabbi, he should consult with another 2 rabbis, and should tell you what it is, and they'll give you the right answer. So these are the instructions that Rebbe gave us, that ask advice, and they will come up to the right answers. Let me share a personal story about such a situation. I teach in the boys' yeshiva, and there was a student who had to make a major decision of a crossroad in his life, in which direction he's going to go. So he wrote to the Rebbe. The Rebbe answered him, he should speak to his teacher, his Hasidic teacher. And the normal answer the Rebbe would answer under certain circumstances would be to go to your principal. That was when a student would ask the Rebbe would send him to the principal. In this case was different. So the student asked me, and he did not tell me that the Rebbe had said to ask your teacher. He just asked me the question. And normally I would say, well, let me think it over. Let me, ponder on this. Let me discuss it with my colleagues. This is a decision that was something that he had to make a decision in which direction he's going to be going in the future. But I felt such a strong answer, I gave it to him immediately. And his parents were not pleased with this answer. They went to the principal. The principal said, well, if it would come to me, I would have agreed with you. But he didn't come to me, and therefore. So here, the Rebbe sort of instructed him to go to a teacher. He told me about this later. I did not know at the time. This is all told years later. He said it's the best decision that he ever took. This really was major in his life, and it was so happy that he took that decision, followed that instead of what his parents had mapped out for him. Very successful and everything else that he did. But it just shows when the Rebbe sends to somebody, instead of answering himself, he gives the insight to the one who's supposed to answer with such clarity. This is the only experience that I had in such a situation. When I see the clarity that was there, it was completely not my way of thinking, my way of acting, but this Rebbe instructed he should go to him. He used me as that conduit, and it was very, very clear, without any hesitation, without any. So I'm saying when the Rebbe says to go to a doctor who's a friend, go to their colleagues who are experts in this field, the Rebbe gives them the clarity that they should be able to see and answer you the answer that you should be receiving. So that is the situation today. Okay, now we have page 5. Moshe Rabbeinu was, the Jewish people came to Moshe Rabbeinu, they want to have meat. Hashem says I cannot lower myself to give them meat. They have the man as a substitute for man, meat. I cannot lower myself to be the conduit for meat. And Hashem says, assemble, this is on page 5, assemble for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, the ones that you know were the people's elders and officers back in Egypt. They're the ones who were the ones who were to see that the Jewish people fulfill their quotas. And if they didn't, the ones who were in charge of them got beaten up. So these were the ones, instead of oppressing the Jewish people, they took the beating themselves, and they were worthy of becoming the leaders. Persuade them to come to the tent of meeting and have them stand with you. I will come down and speak to you, and I will magnify the Spirit which is upon you and place it, some of it, upon them, without reducing what you have, and they will bear the burden of the people with you, so they will not have to bear it alone. This is where we have the Sanhedrin. So you have 70 people, the Supreme Court, 70 people, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader of the court, So that is where we get the Sanhedrin, which is the Supreme Court of 70 members. Now, the system was that every city had a court of 23 members. Then every tribe had a major court that if the lower courts could not solve that question, they would go to the higher court that was the highest court in that tribe. If they were not able to solve the question, then they went to a higher court in Jerusalem. If they couldn't solve the question, they went to a higher court that was on the Temple Mount. If they could not solve it, then they went to a higher court that was in the women's section of the Ezras Nashim in the Beis Hamikdash. When they couldn't solve it, then they went to this. These all were members, all had 23 members, each of these courts. If they couldn't solve it, then they went to the Supreme Court of 71 members. And sitting in session were another 69 judges. 71 were the ones who did the actual rendering the verdict. The 69 were the ones who also were able to join into the discussion. These were the highest among all of Israel. Yes? So you have in the cities, then you had the judge, the Shevet, the tribe, Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, the women's section, and Lishkas Hagazis, the Supreme Court that is in the inner section that had a door open to the inner court of the Beis Hamikdash, being able to view the altar of the Beis Hamikdash.
And the first people all had 23 members.
Yes. Yes. So if the lower courts were able to solve the question, they knew the answer, then it was solved. They didn't have to go higher. It was only if the lower court said they don't know the answer, they would send them to the next level. So this is where we have on page 6, the authority of the high court. Sentence 1. If there's a point of law that eludes your lower courts, local courts, whether something is pure or impure, innocence or guilt, resulting in conflicting rulings among the sages in your city, then, next sentence, you shall make the journey to the holy temple, the place that God your God will choose. Sentence 9. You should come to the priests who are of the tribe of Levi and to the judges who exist at that time. You should question them and they will tell you the words of judgment. So Hashem assures that since halacha means, how does Hashem want you to conduct yourself? Halacha, in what ways to go in the ways of Hashem? So Hashem assures that since you have the question, you're asking, what do I want to be done? I will give the insight and the Supreme Court will come to the right decision. It's going to be a vote. You go according to the majority. And sentence 10. You must obey the words that they will tell you from the place that God will choose. Since you're coming out to the Supreme Court, it's open to the inner court of the Beis Hamikdash. You should carefully obey everything they instruct you. Sentence 11. You shall act according to the teachings that they instruct you and according to the judgment that they issue to you. You must not divert from the words they tell you, even if they tell you that right is left and left is right. That's what you think. But what they're telling you is what Hashem wants. 12. If any man intentionally disobeys and fails to listen to the priest who is standing and officiating there before God your God or to the judge, that man must die. So there is someone who is of stature that is worthy of being in the Supreme Court. And he says, after the Supreme Court renders their judgment, he says he doesn't agree. So then there could only be one way. The Supreme Court is the last word. So this is the authority that Hashem gives to the Sanhedrin. This is also any halacha that has been accepted by the Jewish people, so that becomes binding, and it was al-pi ruach hakodesh. It was according to the divine inspiration that until the 1600s, every authority that was accepted by the Jewish people is according to ruach hakodesh, according to divine inspiration. So this is the authority Hashem gives, and also on page 7, sentence. This is taken from Vayikra, Leviticus, Parshas Achrei, number 30. The courts shall enforce my restrictions, which means, in those who are familiar with Pirkei Avos, ethics of fact, it says, "Asul siyag laTorah," make a fence around the Torah. So also the Torah instructs that you should make a fence in order to prevent anyone from transgressing biblical commandments. Anyone give me any examples of something that is rabbinic, has its sources in the Sanhedrin, has its sources from the Mishnah, Talmud? Anyone? Okay, the Torah tells us not to, basar v'chalav, meat and milk is of a beef, of a four-legged animal. The cow, the sheep, the goat. To be cooked with milk, eaten together, that is a Torah prohibition. It was extended that also chicken, since we consider chicken meats, so that was also included in the prohibition. No chicken or fowl or turkey with milk. The source is in the Mishnah. This is something that is binding. You can't say, well, nowadays people wouldn't make that mistake. Doesn't go. Once it was passed, you need if it was passed by a major court, you need a higher court, people who say that they are greater than the one who passed the restriction, and also has to be passed by a greater majority. So these two things have to be to overturn a Sanhedrin ruling or a court ruling. The ones who are ruling have to say that they are worthy or more knowledgeable, greater than the previous court. And also, they had recordings of records of how many people, what was when it was passed, what was pro, what was con, what was the number. So this court has to have a greater majority than the previous one as well. What's another example that someone can tell me about safeguard? Word is, are you familiar with the word muktzah? Muktzah, what is muktzah? Not to handle certain things on Shabbos. There is no biblical commandment not to handle it. But the early muktzah comes from Moshe Rabbeinu, his court, that said not to move stones, pebbles, earth, things that are have no, not a vessel in any way. So that was the muktzah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Then, in the beginning of the second temple with Ezra, he comes from Babel, he comes to Eretz Yisrael, he sees that Shabbos is a regular day, people are doing business, people are doing everything like a normal day, they're not keeping Shabbos. So he called them all together and he says, we have the laws of Hashem and we're going to make restrictions, extreme restrictions. Nothing could be handled unless it serves a purpose. If it's not serving a purpose for what you're supposed to be used, do not handle it. So it was very restrictive. When you had a cup, the only time you could move a cup on Shabbos, according to that restriction, was when you're ready to drink. But after you drank it, you put it down and you leave it there. That's how severe muktzah was. Only things that are for utensils for eating and drinking, only they may be handled. That excludes clothes or for foods. But other than all vessels cannot be handled. You can't handle a hammer, you can't handle a chisel, you can't handle your weights, anything that has to do with business or anything of that sort, you can't handle it. And they kept it. Then he saw that Shabbos had already become a part of Jewish life. He took off restrictions. He said also that if it is a vessel that is used for work, but you want to use it for a permissible activity, you are allowed to. So let's say I have a hammer. The hammer is used for building. However, what happens if I want to keep this window open and it keeps falling down? I need something to prop the window open so it doesn't fall down. Am I allowed to take a hammer and use that? Yes, because it is a vessel. It is used normally for forbidden work. However, I'm using it now for a permissible thing, and therefore I could also make use of that. So
Do you need to designate it before Shabbos?
no. So we see how we go from an extreme that you started off with you use a cup, drink from it. After that, put it down until we're able to use things that are called a vessel. So we're going to learn about the muktzah as we go along. But I just want to bring out how it was done in stages where it was necessary. They saw this is the necessary fence to make it. When it was no longer necessary, they did themselves take it away. But once it was put into as a law, as a Sanhedrin law, then you need another court to overturn it, even though it's no longer an issue.
So just going based on that, like I heard that, for example, scissors throughout the week, you should have a special designated spots.
For cutting chicken, yes, we have the cut chicken.
Yes, that's a
Yeah.
already.
It should,
Designated scissors.
Right.
That,
That is recommended. It's recommended. It's recommended to have. Yeah. So it's only if you have no other alternative, then you could use this. If you have something permissible to prop it up, then don't use the muktzah, use the permissible one. So this would be only if. So we hear also the Torah tells the courts to make safeguards to make sure that transgression will not be done. And then we have our own safeguards. Let's take again, for people who are accustomed to Shabbos, maybe it becomes a part of them. That's how they grew up. That becomes very natural that they walk into a room, they don't close the lights. People who are trying to integrate Shabbos into their lives, you're going at night and the lights are closed and you come into a room. Oops. No, two separate prohibitions. Opening the light is one prohibition, closing the light is another prohibition. If you open the light, then leave it. Don't say oops. You won't correct it, that's a separate transgression. Okay, now, so how do people who are concerned about this, what would they do to sort of make their own safeguard? It's not, you won't find that safeguard in Shulchan Aruch, but what could you do to safeguard that you don't open and close the lights? You know that you have this. Okay, so you have now the covers. In earlier times, they had tape. People would tape it. And now they have the actual commercial switch covers that you just have. Is there a law that you need one? No. But this one you would see for yourself if you feel that you need this. So you would. In earlier days, you also had the landline telephone that was in your bedroom next to your bed. And people would have you have the calls that just keep going on and on and on and on. And normally you would just pick up the phone when the phone is ringing. So what people did was also they had a little cover. They actually sold a commercial telephone cover. Put it on. So you have the different safeguards that one would make for themselves, knowing that this is going to help them not to forget each other. So these are different things that, again, so you have that which the courts made, then you have your own safeguards that you. There's one more issue that I want to cover. This is also on page 8, biblically. Have you heard the term of Maris Ayin? Maris Ayin, what the eye perceives. That was also a safeguard. So originally, we had non-dairy products that look like dairy. At one time, it was innovation. Having margarine was something that was a newer, a later foods. You had also the Parava ice cream, creamers that were non-dairy. But this was something that was not common, and therefore people wouldn't think that it's actually dairy. So you would come to someone's house and you're serving a meat meal, and at the end you're serving coffee. You bring out the a creamer, and people are sitting at your table, and they see the creamer, and they assume that it is milk. So what conclusion would they come to? One or two. One or two conclusions. Either. What's the either or? Either. Anyone? What conclusion would you come to if you did not know there was such a thing as a non-dairy creamer? You would not know about the almond milk and coconut milk. No? So either you would say that they forgot, and they forgot and they brought out the milk. They said, excuse me, please take it out. Or they would think that you could not eat meat and milk together, but after the meal, you could have milk and a dairy product. You're not eating it with the milk, with the meat. You're just having a dairy product. That's the conclusion people might come. The same would also be when you see a clothes so this is something that is something of late. Then you all in Shulchan Aruch, going back to restrictions, you have what happens if you see that there's clothes there's clothes hanging on the clothesline. Most people don't have. Is clothesline something that you're familiar with? Hanging things out with clothespins. Okay. So if you have things hanging with clothespins, what would you conclude? That it's still wet? You would conclude that it was washed on Shabbos. So Maris Ayin is that you don't hang wet clothes on the clothesline on Shabbos, even though you came in from the rain and you have an indoor dryer. You have the one. So you don't hang it up with your clothespins. You just rather hang it up on a hanger, put it in the back of a chair, but don't put it out that it looks like you've just washed it. That's Maris Ayin. Oh, should we be concerned? The same thing is also going into a restaurant that's not kosher, and the.
Should we also give people like the benefit of the doubt? Like, we should assume the worst.
That's what that's our that's what we should do from our point of view. But what does the Torah tell us? Should we be concerned what other people will think about us? What does the Torah say about that? Huh? We should be or not? Is there a source for this? Okay, so page 8. Page 8. Here's the book button. Page 8, we have the page 8, we have the situation where they came to the border of Eretz Yisrael, they came to the Jordan River, they're now ready to cross over to the other side. The tribe of Gad and Reuben come to Moshe Rabbeinu and say that we would like to settle on this side of the Jordan in the Golan Heights. That's where they want to go. Moshe Rabbeinu says, what are people going to conclude? They're going to conclude that you are afraid to cross over. You want to stay here because it was already conquered. And they're going to say you're going to put a fright the rest of the Jewish people that if they Gad and Reuben, who are the warriors, and they're afraid to go, that means we should also not cross over the Jordan. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm not letting you go. So they say, no. What we're going to do is we're going to build cities for our families. We're the troops, the soldiers are going to cross over with everybody else, Not only are we going to cross over with everybody else, we're going to be the frontline soldiers. We're going to stay there until the land is conquered, until the land is divided, and only then are we going to go back to our families. So they kept their bargain. They stayed there 14 years. Took 14 years to conquer and divide, and only then did they return to their families. Did they take a leave of absence or something? I don't know what happened there 14 years. But anyway, so this is now, let's look into the Torah, sentence 20 on page 8. Moshe says to them, if you do this thing, if you arm yourselves before Hashem for the battle, and every armed man among you shall cross the Jordan before Hashem, until he drives out his enemy before him, land shall be conquered before Hashem, then you shall return, and then you will be vindicated from Hashem and from Israel. V'yisem nikiyim, you will be innocent, me Hashem, and also in Yisrael, they will not suspect that you are doing anything wrong. So the Torah says, don't do anything that is suspicious. On our part, we have to give the benefit of the doubt. But as far as a person doing something that is suspicious, you say, what do I care? What do I care what other people think? That's their problem, not mine. So the Torah says, no. Again, you come to, you're in a Chabad house. You see the Rebbitzin doing something that looks wrong to you. So go to one or two conclusions you'll come to. Either it's permissible because the Rebbitzin does it, or the Rebbitzin is a sinner. So again, you have to not do anything that is suspicious. So that concludes our pamphlets. So let me get the names again.